Hey folks, this is Kalani. We have so many updates to talk about this week. Quite a few classes received some major buffs or nerfs, up to 30% flat buffs in some cases, which is kind of insane. Shamans even have some changes coming through, so they haven't been left in the dust this time. Mythic plus affixes were all ripped out and replaced with a completely new system. The War Within Pathfinder achievement requirements have been revealed. Crafting is going to be very different in this next expansion, and there are a lot of user interface updates to improve your gameplay experience. There's a lot to go over, so let's break it all down. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's kick things off with the class changes because we're starting to see finer tuning changes and there are some pretty huge buffs coming through for certain classes and specs. We're going to start with the Shamans for a change because I know the lack of changes has been almost unbearable for our totem slinging friends. We don't have any major class changes to talk about this week, but the dev team did say that they've been working on a package of changes for Shamans and can confirm that the majority of them will be available to test in the next beta build, which will be deployed next week. We don't know the scope of these changes just yet or whether it's going to be a complete rework. We'll just have to wait and see, but Shamans will see changes next week for sure, so there's something to look forward to. A little bit after these changes were announced, Elemental Shamans also got a 30% damage boost across the board, which is a massive buff and might be one of the largest just generic all damage increase buffs we've seen. This is probably just placeholder until next week's changes come through, so Elemental can actually get some testing in, but a 30% buff is kinda crazy either way. As for other balance tuning and changes, passive bonuses of Avoidance or Leech from various sources have been nerfed almost across the board, so any talents that provided these stats have been cut down almost in half for every class or spec, and the percentage gained from rating for both of these stats was also reduced by 50%, so I guess the dev team doesn't want Leech or Avoidance becoming too commonplace or too powerful that groups can start ignoring their healers again, so we'll have less access to those tertiary stats in general in the War Within. Frost Death Knights saw a lot of changes this week. Various strength bonuses were reduced, but a lot of abilities had their damage increased by up to 23%, with a 100% bonus coming through for Icy Death Torrent damage. Balanced Druids also saw some big buffs. They got a 5% buff to all damage with 15% buffs to Star Surge, Starfall, Fury Balloon and Full Moon damage on top. Shooting Stars, Stellar Flare, Power of Galdrin, Denizen of the Dream and Orbital Strike damage are all up considerably, and then Greater Alignment was buffed as well, so a lot of good buffs coming through for Boomkins. The Hunter rework continues with a few new talents thrown into the mix. Both Steel Trap and Death Chakram have been removed to reduce button bloat, a few Beast Mastery talents have shifted around, and Marksmanship saw some quick nerfs to their AoE potential by reducing the potency of some talents, while increasing the focus cost of Multishot, which really slows down the AoE and cleave rotation and gameplay, which doesn't feel very good. And then Survival will see even more changes too. Quite a few of the previous updates were actually reverted to smooth out the rotation. Coordinated Assault has been simplified. Flanking Strike will now replace Kill Command after 3 casts of Kill Command. Mongoose Fury will now refresh its duration when a new stack is applied, so you can actually keep those stacks rolling now, but its duration was reduced and it only stacks up to 3 times. But this should make it much easier to weave in different abilities while maximizing Mongoose Fury stacks and duration. Wildfire Infusion's reset chance was reduced and Wildfire Bomb will be available less often in general. I'm honestly surprised that Survival is actually getting quite a lot of attention this time around. Hopefully it ends up in a good place. It feels pretty good to play right now and it's ridiculously strong, but that is going to come down to tuning numbers. The gameplay is pretty smooth with these changes in place. Moving on, Mages saw some big switch arounds for Arcane and Fire. Arcane saw a lot of talent shifts with a lot of new talents coming into the mix. Arcane Orb will now be baseline, Arcane Blast damage was increased, Clear Casting will proc less often but be more reliable, and a few other effects were nerfed. Fire saw quite a few nerfs to important buffs and effects, including lower proc chances and lower damage boosts, and Living Bomb was changed quite a bit to increase its single target appeal, so fewer Living Bombs will be applied by default and it doesn't spread as far, but it will also apply Ignite. You can pick up talents that increase the AoE potential and let them spread further, and there are a bunch of different ways to boost the damage as well. This iteration of a Living Bomb is actually really fun to play with, and Fire in general is shaping up quite well, even though it saw a couple of damage nerfs this week. Rogues also saw a few quick buffs this week. Assassination will get a 15% damage increase, Outlaw saw a 20% damage boost, and then Sub also got a 20% damage boost as well. I know Rogues have been struggling a little bit on the beta too, so hopefully these buffs bring them up to most other classes. And then we come to the warriors. A few talents have changed for the class tree. There are some minor adjustments for hero talent trees. Arms will see a 30% damage increase for all of its abilities and an additional 20% more damage on overpower, which is kinda crazy. But then Fury is also going to see the same 30% bonus to all of its abilities as well. So the warrior DPS specs should be doing significantly more damage when compared to previous beta builds. Next up this week, the Mythic Plus dungeon system has been upended yet again, but this time we might actually be in a good spot. If you didn't know, the dev team introduced new affixes that would increase the effectiveness of some trash mobs in dungeons, while increasing the damage of certain classes and specs for that week. They also removed pretty much every other affix besides Raging, Bolstering, Bursting, and Sanguine, which were arguably the least favoured affixes out of the entire lot, so that didn't sit too well either. The good news is that you can forget pretty much all of that anyway, because the dev team ripped it all out and revamped the whole affix system yet again. So now we'll see a new affix right away on +2 keys, which means that they will be active as soon as you step into the Mythic Plus keystone system. These new affixes are called Xal'atath's Bargain, Ascendant, and Frenzied. While Ascendant is active, Xal'atath will periodically spawn a lot of orbs. If these orbs finish their cast, they give enemies a big haste buff. If you interrupt, silence, stun, dispel, or generally just disrupt them in any way, they disappear and give players a stacking haste and movement speed buff instead. Dealing with them is actually incredibly simple if you have AoE stuns or dispels. Blood Elf Arcane Torrent is particularly good here, and the haste buff is kinda like getting a mini lust every minute or so it's really fun to play around with. The Frenzied buff is a bit different. Whenever non-boss enemies get below 30% health, they gain a big haste buff, but they also take 20% increased damage. So it's kinda like Raging, but a damage bonus thrown in. It also won't affect bosses, so you don't have to worry about that affix turning bosses into unstoppable monsters. On +4 keys, you'll start to see either Fortified or Tyrannical, and this will rotate with the weekly reset. When you get up to +7 keys, there's going to be a new affix called Challenger's Peril, which just increases the penalty of deaths to 15 seconds up from 5 seconds, so deaths will become more punishing when you hit this key level. I'm kind of in two minds about this one. On one hand, it triples the punishment here, making it far less likely that you'll time a key if you have a lot of deaths, but on the other hand, that encourages safer, cleaner gameplay. As you master the dungeons, this affix will fade into the background and not really change anything in a meaningful way, so it's going to be all about good gameplay and execution. What's really interesting is that at +10 you'll start to see Fortified or Tyrannical again, but it's going to be the one that wasn't present at +4 for that week. So as the weeks go by, you're going to start with either Fortified or Tyrannical, but if you get up to +10 keys, you'll have both active every single week. This is going to shake things up quite dramatically in terms of balance, because having both active means that neither can be too overtuned, otherwise +10 keys become too difficult. So having both active means they have to keep them in check, so hopefully we'll see better balance throughout all of the dungeons. And then at +12 and above, the Xal'atath's Bargain affixes actually become disabled, and you will instead see Xal'atath's Guile, which just increases the health and damage of enemies by 20%. So pushing keys becomes harder and more punishing, but you also remove the potential RNG factor of the +2 affixes. Personally, I think this would make +12 or higher keys less fun or interesting, but it does make them more reliable, which is also important if you want to push the highest levels of keys. Having a bad spawn of Xal'atath's Bargain could make or break higher level keys, so removing that as a factor means pushing keys comes down to player skill more than RNG affixes. But with all of this together, it means that only that +2 affix will really change week to week if you do high enough keys, and then at the lower end you'll see that typical swap between Tyrannical and Fortified. If you're pushing keys, you have both Tyrannical and Fortified in play, and the +2 affix is removed, so keys then become pretty much the exact same every single week. That's an interesting option. We've never had that before in Mythic Plus. There will be no more easy weeks or hard weeks, no push weeks and no dead weeks. Will that make the system more boring overall, or will it keep players engaged longer because they don't have multiple variables affecting how hard the dungeons are? I guess time will tell. We'll talk more about these changes in detail after the dust settles. Who knows, they might just redesign the whole thing yet again, but I think this current iteration actually works quite well and should hopefully make it easier to balance dungeons and Mythic Plus keystones going forward. Now moving on, this week also gave us our first look at the requirements for the War Within Pathfinder achievement, which is required if you want to use steady flying in the new expansion zones. It seems quite simple on the face of things. You just need to complete the main leveling storylines through each of the 4 new zones and explore all of the new maps to get the Explorer achievement. So you should be able to get that done as you're leveling up or shortly after reaching max level, depending on how quickly you level. So we won't have to wait for a future patch, we won't have to go out of our way to kill rares or hunt down treasures or do side quests, or really anything extra. So completing this achievement and unlocking steady flying should be very easy and available right after you hit max level, but I still don't think it's really necessary. I guess an easy achievement is better than a time-consuming one though, but having it unlocked baseline would probably be the best in my opinion. This week's beta build also gave us our first look at NPC crafting orders. If you tinkered about with professions in Dragonflight, you probably know that crafting orders are a bit weird. Partially because no one seems to want to make public crafting orders because you can't guarantee any quality, and partly because crafting orders are so important for the entire system as a whole, so you kind of need to do them. That's where NPC crafting orders come in. These are totally personal, so everyone will see their own NPC crafting orders, meaning no one can take them from you and you can work your way through them at your own pace. NPC crafting orders will also be the most important source of profession knowledge in the War Within, so if you're interested in skilling up your profession and trade skills, you will need to be completing these orders to progress. They're also going to provide you with the new Artisan's Metal material, which has been called Artisan's Acuity this time around. This helps you fuel profession progression and will be required for some of the most important crafts in the expansion. NPC crafting orders seem to plug a very important gap that was present in Dragonflight, so I'm really excited to see how all of this works when the expansion goes live. If you want to dig deeper into the profession changes coming in the War Within, check out the profession video I'll have linked in the comments below that goes into a lot more detail. There were also a lot of user interface updates this week, including a legend on your world map to help you get used to the new icons. A lot of icons were updated or changed in the War Within, and there are some important new ones like the delves, the hub icon, and a lot of quest icons changed too, so understanding what each icon means will be very important moving forward. That's where the legend comes in. It neatly presents each icon and what it means, so you don't have to do any guesswork or go to an out-of-game resource like Wowhead to find out what each one means. So that's a nice addition. The new hub icon is also really cool because it consolidates all of the important quests and activities that are available in a city or hub without cluttering the world map. Your map is also going to have better filters to let you turn these icons on or off, so you can customize your map a lot better without having to rely on add-ons. If you want fewer icons and less clutter, you can just pick the ones that you're interested in and hide everything else, so that's a great change too. There are also new search boxes for a bunch of other UI elements, like your character select screen, so you can now search through your characters for names, classes, or even professions. So if you don't want to scroll through your list to find your leatherworker, or maybe you just can't remember, you can type it in and it will narrow down your list to just characters with that profession. If you want to have only your hunters visible, just search for hunter. This is a great change and will make managing your characters much easier, especially if you have a lot of them. You can also now search through your spellbook to find the abilities, spells, or passives that you're looking for, so you don't have to flip through the whole thing. And there's even a new search option for your quest log, so if you know the name of a quest, or maybe its objective or the zone it's in, you can just search for that instead of scrolling through every quest you've picked up and haven't gotten around to dealing with yet. And then we also have our first look at the new login screen coming for the War Within. Wowhead pieced this together from data mining, so keep that in mind. It's not on the actual beta just yet, so it could be a work in progress or unfinished. The large cracked world from the War Within logo takes center stage with what looks like a Titan structure surrounding it. It's definitely a cool visual, but it's also a very stark departure from the usual grand vistas that we have for login screens. Going from the Dragonflight screen to this one is going to be quite jarring, and I think it has potential, but I do prefer the environments and the vistas that we've had previously. Now there could be more to this login screen. After you log in, that big circle in the middle could crack and reveal something else, or just transition smoothly to your character screen. But I guess at the end of the day, we don't really look at the login screen for a very long time anymore, and we are going to be immediately met with that cool new character screen, so it probably doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things anyway. But that's all the news and updates we have for this week, so that's it for this video. What do you think of the big class changes in this beta build? What are you hoping to see from the Shaman changes coming next week? And how do you feel about the dev team completely changing Mythic Plus yet again? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can find links in the description or click the join button just below the video. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful in any way, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're always kept up to date. Thanks for watching, folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.